Okay, now that you're smart on smart objects and smart filters in Photoshop, let's actually do a project. So hopefully you've already opened up our picture of Harry. And then remember, because we want to be able to see our layer mask, we're going to right click and make that a smart object from the beginning before we do the selection, and then we're ready to go. So if you haven't done that, back up and do that first. We'll go through the processes here, but there are a few things you need to know about filters, specifically in Photoshop. Photoshop does preserve all of our color spaces. And those of us that have been using Photopea, it doesn't actually do that. So Photopea kind of discards color spaces. It really doesn't matter what your original color mode is, whether something is 16-bit or 8-bit or whatever. However, in Photoshop, if you're going to be using filters, you can only use them with certain types of images. So notice here that this picture is an RGB color mode picture. If I go to image and mode, it says RGB color. That's what JPEGs generally are, and that's what most things we deal with in here are going to be. However, this little GIF images themselves are what we call index color mode. If I go to image and mode, they're in indexed color. So unless you convert these to smart objects, because that's the workaround, unless you convert them to smart objects, using filters does not work on two of these that you need to write down. Bitmap images, which we don't really make BMP images anymore. In the olden days of Windows icons, they used to be those. And then index color. So bitmap and index color will not allow you to utilize filters. But if you convert to a smart object, you can work around that. And you can apply filters to standard rasterized layers, but remember, then they're not smart. And what we're trying to focus on in this class is being non-destructive. So yes, you can use filters on just a general run-of-the-mill picture, just like we've talked about before. I could open, well, I already have that one open, but I could open up this picture of Hogwarts here, and I can go add a filter to it and do whatever I want here. But when I do, and I hit OK, it is destructive. So just remember that. So for that reason, we're going to be using smart filters. So other than that, let me give you some reasons for using smart filters. So we'll add the first one, and then I'll go over the reasons. So let's go here. We're going to start working here on Harry. But before we do that, we're going to drag in, or rather pull in, the picture from Hogwarts. Let's go ahead and file and place the Hogwarts image. If you're in Photopea, same process, open and place. And then we're going to stretch it out holding our shift key, pulling from corners so we don't mess anything up. We want to put it so that this is over here off on the left, roughly this size. Make sure that it does hang off your image a little bit. Now, generally speaking, we wouldn't make something bigger than it is. And this picture is now bigger than it actually should be. But it's okay, because what we're going to do is add filters and it won't matter. So make sure that yours is a smart object, and it should have that icon right there indicating that it is indeed a smart object. That little icon will tell us that. Now we're going to add our first set of filters to this. So we're going to put two filters on this one. Let's go to Filter and Filter Gallery. So the Filter Gallery is much more powerful in Photoshop than it is in Photopea. Unfortunately, Photopea does not have hardly anything in the photo gallery, the filter gallery. In Photoshop, we have artistic filters, brush stroke filters, and notice how when I click on these, it makes them look like paintings, or sort of like paintings. There's just all kinds of different ones that are in here. If you are in Photopea looking at these right now, you're like, man, why don't I have all those things? And I don't know, you just don't. The one I really miss is Sketch. You don't have any of these Sketch ones in Photopea, so that's kind of unfortunate. Now, you can apply multiples of these when you're in this one. So for instance, let's say I put texturizer on here. See how it's listed over here? Same thing in Photopea. If you apply one of these, it will be listed there. But then at the bottom of your screen, what you should see is a little new icon. And that little new icon will allow you to add another one. So I can click the new icon. Now I have another texturizer, but I can change the second one. And so for this second one, maybe I'm going to add this glass effect. Now the order you put these in also matters. So I could put this one down below, which says do the glass first, and then after you've glassed it, apply the texturizer. And so here's what it would look like just texturized. But since we had the glass on there first and then texturized it, we have now those little wiggles in there. So you can pick these up and reorder them. We call this stacking filters, which is something that is a feature that you can do in Photoshop and Photopea. So again, that's that. What I'm going to have you to do for this particular one, we're just going to choose one from in here. And in Photoshop, it's going to be under stylize. So I'm going to delete these. Just press your little trash can down there. And then under stylize, glowing edges. If you're in Photopea, just go straight to glowing edges. I will go ahead and show you here in Photopea. I already have this one done, but let me pull up the filter gallery so you can see it. There we are. Just choose from your list glowing edges. And then you can play around with this if you want to change some of these things. But obviously, dragging these around is going to be slow if you're on a Chromebook. So once you get it, go ahead and click OK. If you're in Photoshop, of course, once you get it, however you want it to look, then again, press OK. And what we now have is our filter gallery showing below, and if we toggle, that's what the little eyeball button does, is toggle the filter on and off. You can see it before and you can see it after. So that looks pretty neat. Okay, so that's the first one that we're going to add there. We've added that on both, and then now we're going to add a second filter. This filter is going to be the color halftone. So under here, we're going to go to filter, and I like color halftone. It's kind of neat. What it does is it creates like a dotted pattern out of your images. Not like pixels, which are squares, but like dots. So it's under Filter, Pixelate, Color Halftone. Same in both programs. When I click on this, the only thing I don't like about this is you can't see it until you hit OK. So you're going to have to kind of wait this one out. Same thing in Photopea. You're just going to have to kind of click it and see what happens. We hit OK. What you should end up with are dots everywhere. And you can change the settings and then redo it again. So on this one for color halftone, I have it set to these. Now the reason mine looks different in here is because I've already changed the blending mode. But otherwise it should be the same. You should end up with this pattern all over your whole thing. What's different about this one is we are going to change the blending mode on the color halftone part. So we're going to double click over to the right for the filter blending options on color halftone. So that's a little button. It looks different if you're in Photopea, but you have a little button off to the right of color halftone. Let's double click it and it will open up. Here are your blending modes. It's set on normal, which is why we see the dots in the black area. But what we're going to do is come down and choose overlay, soft light, or any of these. If I switch it to soft light, it gets rid of it out in those dark areas, which is what I want it to do. I don't want all those pixels out there in the sky. I just want them basically over the image itself. All right, I'm going to hit OK, and that looks good. So again, we did not change the layer blending mode. If I did that, then things are going to look really weird, okay? The layer blending mode stays at normal. We changed the blending mode on that filter. And in Photopea, it's the same situation. You double click off to the right, it's going to pop up, and you're going to switch your blending mode. On this one, I set it to multiply. Again, you can play with really any of them and do it. Here's the soft light that I used on the other. So really a darken one or any of these under overlay will work. It's just up to you as to what you like. Now that's definitely not what we're looking for. I'll just set this one back to multiply. But you can choose whichever you want. What we're doing is we're applying the dots into the area that has those glows. So that's kind of the goal here. Let's try that on this one. I'll double click here and set this one on multiply to match. And then see how it looks more like they're in the dots. If I zoom up, it's like the dots are in the glow area. So I like that. Let's go with multiply on that one. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now we need to move this below Harry. So let's go ahead and drag this layer so that we've got Harry in front of that background. And then we're going to add some additional Harrys on here. So let's click on the first one. If you recall, we can use our move tool. And while holding down the Alt key, click and drag to make a duplicate copy. So let's click and drag one and take it to the left, and click and drag one and take it to the right. Whoops. I was clicked on the wrong thing. Don't be clicked on the layer mask. Let's click on the person. Okay, Alt drag. Oh, still problems. I may just have to duplicate my layer here. Seems like I've got things going crazy. So let's go ahead and duplicate the layer. So right click, duplicate layer, or you can drag that layer into this little new layer icon right here to make a copy. All right, so I've got all my copies. We're going to call this one right. And let's turn all these off and move this one to the right. I've really got to stop moving it separate from my layer mask. Okay, well, here's what's happening is I'm moving my layer, but I'm not moving my mask. I don't know why they're not connected. See this little chain? My chain's not there. I have no idea why. Anyway, if you lost your chain, that's what we need, the chain. Okay, move this guy over here, and I'm going to Control T. If you're in Photo P, Control Alt T. And we're going to kind of have this one over here on this side, right? And hit OK. And then this is going to be the left one. So let's turn this one on, name it left. Let's drag this little guy over here. Oh, remember, I don't have my link. I really don't know why I don't have my link. Control T or Control Alt T if you're in Photo P. And I don't care if they're the same size. I mean, they can be close, but it's fine. All right, and then we got our middle guy. Let's call it middle, and there we go. All right, so we've got all of these on here. We're going to mess with them. Let's make sure that our top guy is on top. So let's pull him up here. We're going to deal with him last. So get him, Link, get him in the spot where he belongs. Okay, and then again, you can justify wherever you want these other ones to be. Okay, so now once I have it, let's turn off all of the ones that we're not working on, and let's work left to right. So here is our left Harry. For this left Harry, what we're going to do is make it look sort of artsy, I guess you would say. So let's go ahead and pop back into the art ones under the filter gallery. So filter gallery. And then we are going to be looking for the artistic ones, and you're going to choose paint daubs. So it kind of looks like it's painted in there. You should have a little set of buttons over here where you can change the size of your brush and the sharpness and all that goodness. So choose whatever you want there. While you're playing around with that, Photo P people, hopefully you have found what you are looking for here on that one, which is going to be, and let me just go ahead and delete all of these. Okay, so here's my left one, and I'm going, oh, my opacity is giving me some trouble here. All right, here's my left one. I'm going to go to filter gallery, and then same thing here, paint daubs. And then you can go through and choose whatever you want and hit OK. There is a place for brush type on both of them, and you can choose simple or you can play around with the other options. It doesn't matter to me. But anyway, what we should have then is we have our filter gallery in here, and it's got it looking kind of artsy this time. Okay, now we want to try to make this look a little more fancy, I guess you might say. Maybe more where it's got darker parts, because right now it's all kind of one note. So we're going to go through and add one called Smart Sharpen. I'll just do this from within here, but it is the same in Photoshop. Go to Filter, Sharpen, and then Smart Sharpen. Now notice here, see how some of these have dots next to them and some don't? If they don't have dots, I don't use them. Because if they don't have dots, that means you can't change anything about it. There's no sliders or anything. It just does it. So if you hit Sharpen, it's just going to sharpen it. Sort of. Okay? So I'm going to click on Smart Sharpen with the dots, which means there's going to be a box pop up. And then you can tell it an amount to sharpen. You're going to want to increase that radius. That's going to give us the darker look here. Going to take a little bit of effort here on your computer's part, so give it some time. Now see how we've got darker areas? I like that better. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So Smart Sharpen is what we're looking for. Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen, and then just make those adjustments. However, I need to link my layer again there. Okay, Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen, and then choose whatever amount you want. Again, just increase that radius though so that you get that darkening effect. Okay, and I've already kind of got mine set, so we'll hit OK. All right, there we go. Again, you could reorder these and it would look a little bit different because it would do one of them before it did the other. On this one, it's not going to be quite as noticeable, but you can just reorder them, just drag them around and see how it looks. It's taken a minute. See, I don't like that, and it's too bright, so I'm going to flip-flop these. I like the sharpen being done second, and that's what it does. If it's at the top of the stack, it's being done last. So what it's doing is it's going through and making it look painty from that filter, and then it's sharpening it. So as we look at that, the order they apply, the bottom goes first, and then we work up that. Now let's look on your notes for a second and talk about 5 reasons to use smart filters, because I've mentioned them, but I want to make sure you've got this, okay? So number 1, we can edit the specific filter settings later. So for instance, on this filter gallery, I can double click the word filter gallery and hit OK, and it's going to bring it back up and let me edit that. So if I wanted to change the brush size or sharpness or whatever the next day, I can do that by just simply double clicking the smart filter. So number one, we can edit them later. Number two, we can mask out areas where we don't want the filter to apply. And I showed that in the last session, where we could click on the mask and paint in a black paintbrush to make certain areas not obey that filter. Third, as we just talked about, we can stack multiple filters and rearrange their orders. Just click and drag them around. Okay. 4, we can move or duplicate the smart filter to another layer. So we don't want to do that in this instance, but just so you can see, if I turned on my right Harry, I could come down and click on the smart filters here and hold down the Alt key. So it's Alt. And click and drag and drop onto this one. And what it does is it takes and copies all of these filters to that layer. Okay. Now I'm going to right click and clear the smart filters, but that's how you can just very quickly. So if I had 2 layers and I wanted them to look the exact same filter wise, I can duplicate those filters holding the Alt key. And then finally, as we've already mentioned, you can modify the blend mode and the opacity of those filter layers. So of those actual filters themselves. So if I thought the paint was coming in a little too sharp here, I could go ahead and click on this button to the right of the filter gallery where I know my paint daubs are. And I could say, you know what, let's pull the opacity back so it doesn't look quite as painted. And see, now the original picture is popping through, and then it's going to not be as painted looking. Now again, this stuff gets rather intensive when it comes to your computer's memory. So you're not going to want to have a lot of things open whenever you're dealing with Photoshop and all these layers, adjustment layers and filters, all these smart things. Okay, so those are your 5 reasons to use those. Okay, so we've looked at a couple of filters already. We've done the halftone filter. Let's look at some additional ones here. So let's go to our new one, our right one. Let's turn the right one on like I have going on here. And for our right one, we are going to do a mezzotint effect. So let's go up to filter, and this is also going to be under Pixelate. And what a mezzotint does is, it's kind of a neat little effect here. It redraws the image as dots or lines or strokes. So you click on Pixelate and Mezzotint, and then you choose what do you want to use, dots, lines, or strokes. And of course you can't see it on mine. There it is. Okay, so see how it's dots? Fine dots. So these aren't like halftone dots, which are big circles. Medium lines, so that kind of goes that way. Kind of has that like, and then strokes is similar. It kind of has that glitchy look, which I think looks pretty cool. So let's go ahead and choose Mezzotint. There it goes. And then let's modify the blending mode on this one. Let's double click it and go through here and change the blending mode. And I wrote down soft light, and you can see there it's not as strong. Okay, let me turn it off. See, there it was kind of harsh. Soft light, we still get the original picture, but then it also has those. Now you don't have to choose that one. You can choose whatever you want. You know, vivid light, very different look here. Overlay, a little bit, you know, not quite as crazy as that. Soft light is much more subtle. So up to you. You can go soft light, you can go one of the others, doesn't matter to me. I'll go vivid light just because, you know, walk on the wild side here. Okay. So that's that. There's lots of other filters. Like I said, Photoshop and Photopea don't have exactly the same filters. Some of the ones that I've showed you so far, though, that you can use in either one of them. I'm going to show you a couple that are a little more specific to Photoshop, though. One of those is called Find Edges. So I showed you under Stylize down here that we've got this one, which is the glowing edges, right? Well, there's also one called Find Edges. Unfortunately, it doesn't work quite so well in Photopea. It's there, but you can't change the blending mode on it for some reason. And it's pretty useless if you can't change the blending mode. But let me show you it, and then you can add it and then just delete it if you'd like to. I'm going to go to Filter and Stylize and Find Edges. it does this kind of look, which is kind of interesting, but it's a lot more interesting if you can change the blending mode. So here, if I switch the blending mode, see how it kind of looks drawn over the top? I think that looks pretty neat. Otherwise, what you're going to have, and if you're doing it in Photopea, you are literally going to have a white image, and then basically you see the contrast where the lines are. So it outlines the edges with dark lines against a white background. That's what Find Edges does. So it's kind of a neat effect. If you were putting something out in the background like we did with the glowing edges, it looks pretty neat though. Another thing that you can do, I'm just going to clear this filter, is, you know how sometimes there's just a tiny bit of a fringe around the edge of something? And we have one here, at least my selection isn't perfect. See, there's just a tiny bit of like red, maybe, I guess. It's just from the background. And we get this with green screen sometimes too. There's just a teeny bit. Well, there's a filter that can actually fix that. Now, you're going to apply it not to the image, but to the layer mask. So this one is pretty cool. So do it to the mask, and it's going to remove just a tiny edge, which hopefully gets rid of that fringe color. So I'm clicked on my layer mask, and I'm going to go to Filter, Other, and Minimum. Now, this technically, because we're not doing it on the smart object, would be considered destructive. So you want to make sure you really like it, or you're going to need to undo right away. But notice here, it moved it in 1 pixel. Now, if I move it in too much, see how I'm losing my picture? All we're doing is scooting the selection in. But notice that 1 pixel, it does fix my problem. I've lost that red edge all the way around. Now, of course, I need to double check because I may have some issues up here with like hair, like his ear is going to need some work after I do this. I'm not going to fix it right now. But there are some areas that would need a little bit of touching up. But the reality is it did fix the fringing problem. So you want to make it as absolutely small as it can be. So that 1 on here is probably going to look a lot better with my ear. I don't know, his ear just looks weird on here. But that 1 pixel does, for the most part, take care of it. 2 is a little bit better, though. Yeah, see how that pulls that in. So anyway, that is a good little tip for using a filter destructively, but you're using on a layer mask, which means you can still paint in or out anyway. So that's a good one. Another one that I'm hesitant to always show because people just want to play with it all the time is the liquify filter. So again, I'm going to do this on the top Harry, and I'd ask you to play along with me too. You're going to go to Filter and then Liquify. Liquify is pretty intense as far as using your computer memory as well. So, you know, not really probably the best one to use on Photopea because it's just really going to struggle. You have a lot more options in Photoshop on here. The buttons are different names, but they do similar things. So in Photoshop, we have the bloat and the pucker tool. Bloat makes things bigger. Pucker makes them not. So if I call this the plastic surgery filter, the liquify. This is how you'll see people, like you've seen it probably really bad Amazon ads where they've tried to like make the person's waist look smaller by pushing the pixels in. So like right here is the forward warp tool. It's a little hand that's like, whoop. So if you take that, it's a brush, but if I go, whoop, see how I just did there? I'm getting rid of his little chubby cheek, and I'm just pushing those pixels in. Now, this is going to be a hot mess in a minute because it's going to push it in inside of my layer mask. So this is something you would do before you would do your layer mask, which then would make it destructive. So I'm not a huge fan of the liquify filter, but notice if I click OK, it makes the adjustment, but notice in here, it's now filling in my leftover with the background. So this isn't going to work for this particular image. You'd kind of almost have to do it destructively. But let me go back in here just to show you what other things it can do. So you can forward warp your things. You can twist them. The students like to sit around and twist things. If you just click and drag your mouse around to, you know, why would we do this to somebody, right? The bloat and the pucker, so I can make his nose bigger as I drag my mouse, like so. Or pucker to make his lips smaller, and so forth. You can use a smaller brush. Notice that, you know, this is going to start messing up pixels, and so this is one of those things that you would probably not do until we learn our next unit, where we're going to talk about retouching tools, so we can fix those pixel problems. But anyway, that's Harry now that I've done that sad plastic surgery to him. So, but that's the liquify filter. I'm going to clear that puppy as well. So now we're back to normal on this one. The last one I want to show you here, and then we're going to stop this and come back in to finish this project, is going to be the blur filter. So if you go to filter, the blur I like to use is the Gaussian blur. It's kind of the most natural blur if you're just going to blur things out. However, the motion blur is cool if you want more of a like something's moving look. So a Gaussian blur would be like if you're blurring the background on something. You know, like I have a picture of a animal or a person and I want the background to be blurred more, then you can paint that out using the blur filter. And I've showed you that I think in the past, but you can add that in, click on your filter, take a black paintbrush, and then paint back in those areas that you want to be in focus. For instance, I want his whole head in focus, but I don't want his body right here, so it's focusing on him. You can do that with that blur filter. So that is some of the different filters, and you can play around. I do want you to play around just to see the other filters that are available under that filter menu. Again, you have a lot more choices if you're in Photoshop than you do if you're in Photopea, but I've mentioned the ones that should work in both, that you have available in both of those programs. So we're going to save this, and I would suggest if you haven't saved to be sure to save a copy of this PSD file just in case something goes crazy or your computer or Chromebook lock up, and then we will resume in the next session.